Okay. Let's see if we can
I think you
get
got to read the whole
audio
thing.
working.
We're educating the American people, right?
Yeah.
So you can read part of it.
Yeah.
Then get tired of reading it. I'll finish the rest.
Okay, let me see here. Audio. Test, test. Before we kick things off, make sure I got it. Live. Can you hear me? We're just getting the audio set up, folks. Want to make sure we got. Okay. Video's coming in shortly. Stand by. Hey, Stewart, say a few words.
Yeah. So we are here representing a
Just to make sure the audio works before we kick off.
Test, test.
And can you text in here? You get the audio? Can you hear both me and Stewart?
My mic's not on. You want my mic on?
Well, that would help.
Well, let me know. Test, test, test.
Wait for it to connect. Okay, so looks like audio is perfect. You can hear both of us. Oh, interesting. Apparently, they just closed off Lafayette Park for us. Interesting.
It's all blocked out.
Yeah, I'll turn on the video here shortly. Just stand by. When did you close the park?
They're doing construction.
Like just right now?
Well, it's going to be a little bit. They're redoing the fountains and stuff.
Are we able to go in?
You got a tour reservation?
No. We're gonna do a press.
Down that way.
We're gonna do a presser right there in the middle. In the middle
of the sidewalk.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, sir. All right, share. As we get set up, about 1 minute out before we go ahead and turn the video on and start this. Okay. So they're doing a little bit of a construction here at Lafayette Park, just north of the White House. And for those just coming in right now, before we turn on the video, it's a nice, breezy, cool day in the nation's capital, the District of Columbia. President Trump is in the White House. Apparently, he has, at 1 o'clock, after this, you're going to see Carolyn Leavitt speaking, with providing information to the press corps. At 3 p.m., you're going to, apparently I'm hearing that the president is doing some sort of a signing this afternoon. And immediately after that, he's departing for Davos, Switzerland to speak at the World Economic Forum. Well, before all that happens, we want to make the case to President Trump.
Hey, Ivan. Here. Take your hot chocolate back.
So stand by.
My hands are freezing.
As we get set up. Okay. We're at the White House,
Test, test.
and make sure we have audio, video, and we got audio. Test 1, 2, 3. Okay. Let's go ahead and get that going. All right.
Can you click the button video? I have it on 4K.
Okay. Here we go.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. We are here in front of the White House. My name is Ivan Raiklin. I'm here with Stewart Rhodes. And the reason why we are here today, 1 year from the date when President Trump was sworn in, basically in 3 hours from now is when President was sworn in last year, 365 days ago. And immediately what he did was fantastic. He pardoned most of the January 6ers.
All but 14.
All 14. We're going to get into some of that. And we are of the opinion, and I think there's a growing majority that are of the same opinion, is that we need to start moving into more aggressive, bold action by this White House, and particularly President Donald Trump, in order for us to be able to save this republic.
Amen.
And so the reason why we're here is we're going to urge, with legal precedent, Yale educated lawyer. I'm also an attorney, retired Lieutenant Colonel, Green Beret, and we're here in our personal capacities as elements of we the people in order to convince, with a very compelling both legal and constitutional argument and political argument, to be able to ensure that this president in a timely fashion invokes the Insurrection Act. And so let's kind of begin.
And we were speaking on behalf of a group of concerned patriots who are prior military, national security, or current inside the administration, and we're on their behalf. And we're seeking to hopefully build a groundswell of support for this necessary action. Go for it.
All right, so we're going to start off by reading this, and then we're going to give a little bit more context to it. So let's kick this off. So this is a situation. These are the federal authority options in response to coordinated state level defiance and national institutional corruption and defiance. This particular memo is for the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, as well as Elon Musk and Dana White. And we'll explain why that is. Dated January 20th, 2026. In summary, Mr. President, conditions now exist that meet the historical and statutory threshold for decisive federal action under existing law. In multiple states, not only Minnesota, senior officials are signaling open resistance to federal enforcement, asserting control over National Guard units as part of their defiance, encouraging obstruction of federal officers, and creating conditions in which federal law cannot be executed through ordinary judicial means. This pattern is escalating, not resolving, and delay materially increases institutional risk. This is no longer a political or rhetorical dispute. It is an operational question of whether federal authority will be enforced uniformly or selectively nullified by coordinated state-level defiance. Clear constitutional remedies already exist, have been used by prior presidents across party lines, and are designed precisely for this category of breakdown.
So, key observations. State executives are publicly asserting authority over federal enforcement and guard units. Federal officers are being obstructed, threatened, assaulted, and politically targeted for carrying out lawful duties. American citizens who support federal authority are being attacked in the street and in their churches in clear violation of their constitutionally protected rights. State and local officials refuse to protect their rights. Judicial remedies are increasingly ineffective or delayed in real time. Historical precedent confirms federalization authority when states refuse to act. Immediate option: invocation of Insurrection Act to ensure execution of federal law and protection of constitutionally protected rights where state authorities fail or refuse to do so. Resistance to lawful authority, transparency, and accountability at the federal level. Current conditions also indicate a growing and coordinated pattern of institutional defiance involving elements within federal agencies and political operatives that obstructs the execution of federal law pursuant to the Constitution and perpetuates systemic corruption. This pattern reflects a broader challenge to uniform enforcement of the Constitution and federal statutes, where ordinary judicial remedies are increasingly ineffective in real time. Existing federal mechanisms, including the Insurrection Act and declassification authorities, were designed for such breakdowns and have been exercised by prior presidents when institutional integrity was at risk.
Recommended follow-on. Intelligence review and targeted declassification by Tulsi Gabbard and the intelligence community to restore public trust and institutional accountability. Consequences of continued inaction. If unresolved, the unrest will only grow, as we're seeing. As the weather becomes warmer, you're going to start to see further escalation. Further continuation of this pattern risks normalizing coordinated resistance at both state and federal levels, leading to evidence degradation, operational paralysis, and erosion of public trust in government institutions. Delay may require more disruptive corrective measures later, increasing political and operational inability while reducing viable options for restoration of lawful order. Now, the political ramifications of failing to act. Continued inaction will cause the GOP to lose the midterms. The great cross-section of the American people who elected President Trump 3 times are becoming dispirited, quote, black-pilled, as some say, because of well-documented, systemic lack of accountability in government. They want decisive action to expose and end government corruption. Decisive action prior to the primaries will energize your base and give them the chance to successfully primary out weak and corrupt Republicans as well as Democrats and run true America First candidates that great cross-section of Americans will once again support and successfully elect, preserving the majority in Congress. Only action will do that. Failure to do that guarantees a loss of the majority, which will result in impeachment yet again and potentially removal from office at a minimum. Further, decisive action now will also allow patriotic JFK, Bobby Kennedy Democrats to purge out the corrupt politicians in the Democratic primaries and replace them with true patriots. This will lead to a national unity and return to constitutional order. Current conditions and escalation. I'm going to go into the timeline over the last 12 years almost, starting with the auto pen pardon date of 2014. The timeline below, drawn from public reporting, declassified materials, congressional inquiries, and contemporaneous records, demonstrates a persistent campaign of obstruction.
2014, Ukraine-Biden connections, noted as UKR, Ukraine, Biden 10% big guy. 2015, early Crossfire Hurricane spying activities. 2016, Crossfire Hurricane investigation and General Flynn's takedown. 2017, the Mueller investigation. 2018, the first impeachment hoax against President Trump. Insurrection riots at Charlottesville, for example. 2019, the second impeachment hoax, COVID-19, 2020 election irregularities and associated riots. 2020, COVID and election irregularities. 2021, Fedsurrection, second impeachment hoax, and the January 6th committee. 2022, continuation of January 6th committee. The lawfare begins. DOJ, Jack Smith, Fannie Willis, Alvin Bragg, Letitia James in New York, DC, Florida, and Georgia in an unprecedented indictments of a president. 2023, continued escalatory lawfare. 2024, assassination attempts against President Trump. 2025, Minnesota insurrection, ongoing arrest into 2026. 2026, current Minnesota insurrection, rebellion, Virginia follows suit on day one of the new trifecta of Democrat control in Virginia.
Recent developments in Minnesota exemplify escalation. Governor Tim Walz, shown to be a CCP surrogate practically, has issued statements labeling federal ICE operations as a modern-day Gestapo and urged their departure from the state, while issuing a warning order to the Minnesota National Guard, asserting, quote, "They are our guard to protect state interests." Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey has similarly discouraged cooperation, stating ICE should, quote, "get the fuck out of Minneapolis," close quote, and implying potential state-level prosecution of federal officers. These declarations have coincided with physical assaults on President Trump's supporters, including a January 2026 clash where protesters attacked individuals in Trump apparel and patriotic apparel at deportation rallies, and a late 2025 pro-Trump event in Minneapolis where counter-protesters caused injuries amid ICE-related unrest. Governor Walz documented ties to the CCP, including 30 visits to China, a 1989 teaching role involving alleged personal connections to Chinese Communist Party officials, and funding from Chinese sources for student trips raised additional concerns of foreign influence amplifying domestic resistance. Whistleblower reports to congressional committees have prompted investigations into these links as potential influence operations. That doesn't even mention the Somali fraud. Internal betrayals within your administration, President Trump, further illustrate the conspiracy's depth. Recent disclosures reveal that former Attorney General Bill Barr communicated with Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis and other prosecutors targeting President Trump, coordinating on election-related investigations despite his role in the administration. This aligns with revelations about General Mark Milley, who engaged in unauthorized communications with Chinese counterparts, assuring them that he and Department of Defense at the time elements would not follow orders in the event of conflict with China, undermining civilian command authority.
Legal authority and historic precedent. Federal law provides the president with authority to ensure execution of U.S. laws when obstructions render ordinary judicial proceedings impracticable. This authority has been invoked approximately 30 times in American history. We're talking about the Insurrection Act. So relevant precedents include Thomas Jefferson, the president who signed the Insurrection Act into law, invoked it in 1807 to suppress Aaron Burr's alleged conspiracy. Troops mobilized, but plot collapsed. James Madison used it during the War of 1812 to suppress unrest. Andrew Jackson threatened the use of the Insurrection Act during nullification crisis, but compromise averted deployment. Abraham Lincoln did use it extensively during the Civil War to suppress Confederate rebellion and draft riots. President Grant, multiple invocations during Reconstruction to suppress Ku Klux Klan violence against freed blacks. For example, 1871 in South Carolina. And then President Eisenhower, in 1957, invoked the Insurrection Act to enforce federal law and protect civil rights of black students, enforcing school desegregation in Little Rock, Arkansas. The governor of Arkansas had ordered his state guard to block integration of the schools. President Eisenhower called the Guard of Arkansas into national service and then deployed the 101st Airborne to escort the students. John F. Kennedy invoked in 1962 for desegregation at the University of Mississippi and in 1963 at the University of Alabama, again, to protect civil rights. Lyndon Johnson invoked the Insurrection Act in 1965 to protect Reverend Martin Luther King's Selma marches and to keep the peace in the 1967 and 68 urban riots. Then George W. Bush invoked the Insurrection Act in 1992 during the Los Angeles riots and deployed the U.S. Marine Corps to the streets of Los Angeles. In each instant, federal authority was exercised to restore lawful order, protect rights, and preserve the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution. Recent historical advocacy for similar action. In December of 2020, myself, Stewart Rhodes, issued open letters to President Trump urging invocation of the Insurrection Act and mass declassification to address election irregularities and institutional threats. While leading to lawfare against myself and members of my organization, our advocacy of this undertaking underscores prior recognition of such mechanisms for restoring accountability. It's the obvious answer.
Ongoing lawfare targeting you, Mr. President, loyal supporters as well. President Trump, you remain a co-defendant with Stewart, Rhodes, and other commuted, meaning not yet pardoned, Oath Keeper members, as well as Enrique Tarrio, and commuted, not pardoned Proud Boys in 2 ongoing civil lawsuits before Judge Amit Mehta, an Obama appointee. 1 lawsuit by members of the United States Congress, which was initiated by Benny Thompson, who was the chair appointed by Nancy Pelosi of the January 6th Fedsurrection Cover-Up Committee, also known as the Unselect Committee. Another lawsuit by a group of U.S. Capitol Police officers, despite no Oath Keepers or Proud Boys assaulting any of them. These cases represent continued, sustained lawfare on you, Mr. President, and on key figures resisting the pattern described previously. That lawfare will only increase unless decisive action is taken to root out systemic corruption in our government. Scope of presidential authority that you have over federal agencies and declassification, sir. As Commander-in-Chief, the President holds ultimate authority over executive branch agencies, including the full United States intelligence community, all elements. For comprehensive coverage, operations should target all 17 intel community members, as well as the Office of Director of National Intelligence, plus any other locations suspected of holding relevant data. For example, DOJ components, private contractors, offsite servers. The full list of the 18 U.S. intelligence communities includes specifically the ODNI, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, and particularly elements of the Department of Justice. Not only the release of the Epstein files, which was recently signed into law by President Trump, and this current DOJ, similar to Bill Barr, is not doing the direction and the directive of the U.S. Congress and this president. Oh, regarding the declassification, the president possesses under Executive Order 13526 and a proposed superseding executive order to declassify information extending to files from any agency. This includes delegation to the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, for expedited reviews.
Recent precedents in transparency. Elon Musk's initiatives. Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter, now X, in 2022, and subsequent release of the Twitter files exposed internal corruption and government involvement in content moderation, including regular meetings with FBI, CIA, NSA, and DHS personnel and officials influencing censorship decisions inside of Twitter. This transparency effort resulted in a large cross-section of Americans, including many Trump voters, highlighting institutional overreach. It targeted a large cross-section of Americans, including many Trump voters, highlighting institutional overreach. Musk's role in the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, from 2025 onward, identified federal waste through contract audits, canceling redundant programs, and exposing inefficiencies in agencies like USAID and VA, though some savings claims were adjusted after review. These actions demonstrate the value of targeted exposure in restoring public confidence. Further, in an interview on Joe Rogan's podcast, Musk referenced the censorship industrial complex operated by pre-acquisition Twitter, including alleged government corruption, suppression of free speech, and involvement in issues like COVID-19 vaccine mandates, election-related censorship, and wrongful actions against users. Musk characterized disclosure as a key step in a path to save the republic, close quotes, through accountability and legal action. In the March 2025 appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, Elon Musk publicly addressed why he hasn't released these files yet, explaining that the content is highly sensitive and could pose significant personal risks, stating he must be careful not to push too hard as it might shorten his lifespan or endanger him. He expressly stated that he could be assassinated. This cannot continue in a free society. We urge Elon Musk, as the owner of Twitter 1.0 and Dana White, or 2.0, and Dana White, now on the board of Meta, to join in the full disclosure of corrupt, fraudulent, and criminal activities of former and current federal, state, and local officials based on analysis of their Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram usage. This declassification or exposure of governmental holdings of corruption and private disclosures of Twitter files and meta files of this magnitude must be released in time for incumbent government officials to be forced to resign at scale at all levels, just as Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, was forced to announce he will not seek re-election in the wake of exposure of the Somalian-tied corruption in Minnesota, thus providing the electorate an opportunity to support American citizens that are not blackmailed or already corrupted to enter the electoral arena across all political party primaries, but no later than March 3rd, 2026, when the primary elections will begin in states such as Texas. Rationale for rapid execution. The core rationale for expeditious action is to preserve evidence of institutional defiance by preventing destruction, or concealment of records. This approach mirrors coordinated law enforcement operation to secure premises and data before degradation. Military intelligence and SOCOM assets should lead initial secures of data to maintain control and minimize disruption. Strategic considerations. Delay in addressing this pattern compounds risk as resistance normalizes and corrective measures become more challenging. Timing is critical to enable accountability before institutional entrenchment deepens. A further urgent rationale for expedited action is to complete this operation in major declassification before the primaries for the 2026 midterms. The exposure of oath-breaking, criminal, corrupt, and treasonous Republicans, as well as Democrats, would allow the American people to finally purge out the corruption in both major parties.
The Make America Great Again base would be able to primary out the corrupt incumbents and replace them in the primaries with true America First patriots. This is the only realistic chance for the GOP to retain and potentially, likely, I would say, expand control of Congress in the midterms, while simultaneously exposing corrupt Democrats and building momentum for a genuine America First agenda in the next Congress. Potential follow-on actions, if considered. Review of executive authority to ensure uniform execution of federal law throughout the Republic. Preservation of records for institutional accountability. Intelligence assessments and scope transparency to restore confidence. Proportionate steps to reestablish federal supremacy and protect constitutional order. Limits and challenges. While the Insurrection Act grants significant discretion, courts have also historically deferred to presidential determinations of necessity. Certain categories, example, restricted data under the Atomic Energy Act, remain protected. Declassification does not override the Espionage Act or Presidential Records Act. This hypothetical aligns with the urgent need for transparency and accountability. Further analysis can be provided upon request. This memorandum to the president is signed by Stewart Rhodes, founder Oath Keepers, Army Airborne veteran, Yale Law grad from 2004. You can find him on @RealOathKeepers on X. And myself, Ivan Raiklin, retired Lieutenant Colonel, Special Forces, also an attorney. And you've heard me out there in the public as the Deep State Marauder and the Secretary of Retribution, America's Secretary of Retribution. But this doesn't end there. This is on behalf of a group of concerned national security, military, and legal personnel, both within this administration and outside of the current administration. And that number is growing as we communicate through platforms such as X and Rumble. So now I want to kind of give you, Stewart, a couple minutes you want to add?
Sure.
on what the current state of our union is and what we can do moving forward, and I'll close out.
Yeah. So a growing number of Americans realize that our political system is broken and is almost irreparably corrupt. Both major parties, that's why they're referred to as a uniparty, treat the American people like cattle and are robbing them blind and stealing their rights away piece by piece. Trump's own base, the people who voted for Trump, you had a cross section of America, walkaway Democrats, traditional conservatives, Ron Paul Republicans like myself. I work for Ron Paul here in Congress. Independents all came together and voted for Trump 3 times in a row. And I think a good analogy is that we realized that the swamp was overflowing. We have crap in our house, flooding our house, and we hired Trump as the plumber 3 times. And we expect him to fix it. And if he doesn't fix it, then we're going to have to fix it. We'll have to start knocking holes in the foundation with shovels and pickaxes and sledgehammers and take care of ourselves. So we call on him to do what he was sent there to do. He was spared in Butler. His life was spared by God, I believe, so that he has a chance to save this republic. He'll be given a brief reprieve and a chance to save it. He has to fulfill his destiny. He needs to channel his inner Andrew Jackson, his inner Lincoln, his inner Teddy Roosevelt. He reacted like a warrior in Butler when he was shot, and that's why he won the election. He won the working class vote at that time. But it was to drain the swamp and take down the deep state. It was not for any other purposes. Foreign policy and trade negotiations are great, but that's not why he was sent there. He was sent there to fix it and drain the crap out of our house. So I really encourage President Trump to remember why he's there and to understand that this is his destiny. I think he knows this, but we just encourage him to be decisive and courageous. He has good people around him. Tulsi, I believe, is a patriot. He's got Robert Kennedy Jr. I believe Pete Hegseth is also a patriot. He's got some good people around him, but he has to focus on the bad guys here in Washington, D.C. It's not the foot soldiers out there in the streets of Minnesota that really are a problem. It's right here. And I encourage him to use his authority and embrace his destiny.
So later today, the President of the United States, while he's currently in the White House, is scheduled to go overseas to Davos, Switzerland, to attend the World Economic Forum, to represent the United States of America. The donor class that worked together with us 79 million that voted for him, I understand. They got him there and they provide him the resources in order to be able to secure a re-election. I accept that. Most of us accept that. So the way we view it is that the first year of this administration, short of potentially that first day, from our perspective, has been focused primarily on foreign interests. As you see, and I get it. We want peace through strength. We want peace throughout the world. But I think at this point in time, it would be nice for the president to listen to folks that are not in your administration that have been the most loyal to the Constitution and to you personally. Stewart Rhodes, it's very cold today, but I want to ask you if you can pull out the tattoo on your arm.
Yeah, I could do that.
Sure. And tell us a little bit about that.
Well,
Might not last too long because it is a little chilly.
I'll use your mic. No, what I would just say is that I got this tattoo after President Trump was shot in Butler and in prison because, like I said, I realized that 1, God saved his life, but 2, he reacted like a warrior that day. It was that kind of physical courage. You got to go back to George Washington himself or Teddy Roosevelt or Andrew Jackson. That's the kind of courage, physical courage he showed that day. So he has a warrior's heart, and you can't fake that. It's real. He jumped up. First thing he was worried about is where are my shoes? And then he jumped up and raised his fist in the air and said, fight, fight, fight. That's a warrior's response to being shot at. You're not going to see that from Sleepy Joe. He'd have been in the fetal position. So that's when Trump displayed his warrior's heart. And all the men in my unit, black, white, and Hispanic, all cheered for President Trump. And the inmates said, you know, Trump's a legit OG. I mean, vast respect as a man. And that's when I knew that he had won the working class vote of all the men across the country of all races. The majority of black males, for example, that's the first time that I know of in recent history, they voted for Republican. It's because of that courage he showed. So I believe that's his destiny. And that's why we were in Washington, D.C. on January the 6th. We were there to protest against a coup that was against the will of the people and in violation of our Constitution. And those of us went to prison. In fact, the 14 of us that were commuted, not pardoned, were all the guys that went to trial and refused to bend the knee and kiss the ring. We refused to turn on President Trump. We could have done that. We could have turned on him and bore false witness and just gone home. None of us had to do any prison time, but we refused to turn on him. And so we still have 12 of us that need pardons now. I believe 8 of us are veterans. I'm a disabled veteran, lost all our benefits. So we would like to be restored. But above all, we want our country restored. So I encourage President Trump to remember how he reacted that day. Let that not be his high watermark for courage. Let this now be his high watermark that he saves the republic. And I encourage him, that's why I'm saying declassification is so essential. Start with the judges. Start with the corrupt judges. Expose their corruption, whether they're pedophiles or taking money from communist China, or whether they've insider trading, whatever their crimes are, expose them. That's how the intelligence agencies control politicians and judges, is through either blackmail or bribery. So expose them and take them down. And then do the same thing through Congress, through both political parties. Let's purge our system completely for all Americans of both sides. We have been falling for a divide and conquer in this country. The elites love it when we fight each other in the streets and think only in terms of Democrat versus Republican. Let's unite and focus on them, the actual enemies of our republic.
Which kind of leads to my second part that I want to say is that while you're traveling to Davos, Switzerland, you still have a lot of problems here domestically, Mr. President. And if you can focus the next few weeks, couple months, moving forward, going to March 3rd of 2026, when the primaries begin, the primary season in 26 begins, 46 state legislatures, state house, state senate, you're going to see primaries beginning. And then across 435 members of Congress are up for re-election, as well as 34 U.S. Senate seats. So with that, I think the president needs to refocus, think about what the maximum authority you have at your disposal in order to stop the escalation, because this is what's going to happen. You've been forecasting it for 6 years. I've been forecasting it for a few years as well. Look at what just happened in Virginia. The very first thing, and this was on Saturday, when John Brennan's protege, Abigail Spanberger, took over with her attorney general, the first thing that they do is start to strip away First Amendment and then are moving to stripping away the Second Amendment. This is an open insurrection through legislative means, even though it violates the federal Constitution and our individual rights. The only way to stop this, it's not through half measures, it's through full measures. And those full measures are the maximum legal authority that have been invoked approximately 30 times in the past through an insurrection act, not just to stop the open insurrection in Minneapolis for the fraud, the daycare fraud, or in Ohio with the elderly care fraud. It's also in Virginia. And I'd like to remind you that you have now 3 trifectas in DC, in the local government, in Maryland, and now in Virginia. And the reason why Virginia is so important is because the classified material that we're discussing that needs to be released, much of it is held within authorities of the Director of National Intelligence, which is housed in Virginia. Much of the intelligence community is part of the Department of War. The Department of War headquarters, the Pentagon, is also in Virginia. So what we expect to see if the Insurrection Act is not invoked and not address this lawlessness, you're going to start to see the manifestation of James Comey's seashells 8647. And it's not just going to end with 8647. They're going to continue to escalate it to the family of this White House, of this president, and wipe out the entire legacy. But more importantly, for the rest of the country, every single person, all 79 million of us, because it's all out there. You can find all this stuff out. Who voted for whom, the social media platform profiles of everybody. they're going to go after everyone one by one. And the first thing that they're going to do, just like in New York they started, and in Virginia, I'm hearing that they're trying to pass a law to frame January 6th has to be taught in public schools moving forward as the insurrection, as opposed to the Nancy Pelosi facilitated, incited, instigated entrapment known as the Fedsurrection that ensnared 1,575 thus far. And that number is going to grow if they come back into power. The only way to stop the lawlessness is through massive, bold, decisive action. And it's not novel. It's known as the Insurrection Act. And the details of exactly how that's going to look is we're going to discuss this moving forward on our channels on X, as long as Elon allows us to talk.
Let me just add something,
And
though.
one last thing I want to say is, in the next coming days, I'm going to actually talk to, I'm going to address this to Elon Musk and Dana White, because this applies to you along with President Trump and Tulsi Gabbard. The American people voted and demanded for transparency. Elon Musk has already provided that in the form of his Twitter files. That was phase one. He's still sitting on the Fauci files, and he's still sitting on any and all criminal evidence based on his own tweets of that he's sitting on a crime scene. There needs to be literally a press conference out here at the White House with President Trump, Tulsi Gabbard, Elon Musk, and one of the board members of Meta, Dana White, who so happens to be a close friend of President Trump. All four of you, I recommend, should be standing side by side as you announce phase one of invoking the Insurrection Act, which is the exposure at scale. You might even throw in Chris Pavlovsky, who has stood up for the First Amendment, who's the CEO of Rumble, in that crew, to expose to the American public, both Democrat, Republican, independents, nonpartisan, those that care less about politics, expose all of the corruption from government classified holdings, government holdings, and then private holdings of Facebook, Meta, Instagram, WhatsApp, Twitter, and show all the criminality of all previous and current government officials. And that doesn't even include the Epstein stuff.
Yeah, and so on Minnesota, I'll just say this, that half measures don't work. In fact, I would say that half measures led to the tragic shooting of Miss Good, because you have people who are enraged by propaganda against ICE, who are set loose on ICE, who don't understand use of force policy inside of law enforcement. You know, a angry Karen, TDS suffering Karen, is not aware of the fact that a vehicle could be considered lethal force. So you should not have ICE agents on foot having to deal with people in vehicles who don't understand what they're doing and just raging around because they've been brainwashed to believe that ICE are Nazis, when they're actually going after child sex traffickers and people that are killing our country, our young people with fentanyl. Point is, though, is that those half measures don't work. That officer had been drugged prior to that by another crazed leftist in a vehicle. So to prevent that, you'll have more safety and less chance of death like that by employing enough troops to cordon the area off. And so the analogy is what Eisenhower did in 1957 when the schools were being desegregated after Brown versus Board of Education. The Arkansas National Guard was called up by their governor to block the schools, and immediately Eisenhower nationalized, invoked the Insurrection Act, and nationalized the Arkansas National Guard, bring them under his command. And then he had this 101st Airborne go in there to escort the kids. So you might think, well, that could lead to violence, but it did not. It led to a very peaceful outcome because no one wants to dance with the 101st Airborne, and local National Guardsmen there are not going to go against the president's orders once they're brought under his command as commander-in-chief. So I believe that's safer for Americans in Minnesota to have the National Guard deployed, and I would also recommend airborne troops as well. Follow that model. So we saw just the other day when Jake Lang, another J6er, had a protest or tried to do a protest in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. Him and his followers were brutally attacked. Frankly, it was attempted murder. I believe he was attempted to stab him. But you should not have a situation where Americans can't exercise their right to free speech. Whether you agree with their opinion or not, every American has a right to free speech and to peaceably assemble. And to have a situation where they're terrorized and then driven away by force in violation of their free speech highlights the necessity of stepping in. Local law enforcement stood down in violation of their oaths. We saw this. This is why I wanted Enrique Tarrio to be here today. Fortunately, could not make it. But both Oath Keepers and Proud Boys all across the country, all through the Trump administration, in hundreds of examples, protected Trump supporters from violent Antifa and other leftists in the streets who use violence to suppress the free speech and assembly of fellow Americans. So we saw that repeated pattern where law enforcement were sadly and dishonorably following unconstitutional orders to stand down and not protect the rights of the American people. Whenever they were in a Democratic-dominated area, they would follow these orders. The same pattern was done here in Washington, D.C. We saw it in Berkeley, California, or Portland, Oregon, Atlanta, Georgia, Minneapolis itself. We were there in Minneapolis one time, too, for a Trump rally. Point being that pattern is still being carried forward right now. We believe it will be even worse this coming summer. It's cold out right now, but we think that the summer of 2026 will be, if this is not stopped now, nipped in the bud, the violence will be worse than it was in 2020. And
give us an opportunity to resolve this through political means.
because the
That's through
president,
massive disclosures,
Right.
allowing us to infuse the electoral system with clean Democrats and Republicans,
Right.
forcing the mass, as we mentioned, the at-scale resignations when all of this criminal evidence is exposed of not only members of Congress, governors, state legislatures, and their staff.
yes, because the corruption is endemic across the country. I've traveled all over the country and spoke to people from both political parties all over the country, and it's right down to the town level. It's bad. So we have a very corrupt political system, a very corrupt legal system. And on that topic, I'll tell you, I was in prison with innocent men who were railroaded by prosecutors across the country, who suborned perjury, coerced false confessions, and false testimony. A lot of guys were in there for what we call ghost guns and ghost drugs. No actual guns, or no physical evidence of an actual gun in possession of a felon, or actual drugs. Just somebody some other guy, some other poor sap, who was coerced into a false confession and told, you're going to either plead guilty and testify against this guy, or we'll give you 30 years in prison. So they go and they get on the stand and they lie. They're being coached by the prosecutors. So our political system and our legal system is broken. It's not just because of January 6th I say this. I saw it a long time ago as an attorney. So we need to fix this. We need to fix it for all Americans of both political parties, or all political parties.
And last thing, can you highlight similar topic is that if this doesn't occur, the escalation of law force is going to continue against President Trump.
Yeah.
Because if this doesn't happen, guaranteed the Democrats win this election cycle.
Yeah.
And then number two, then the two lawsuits that you're co-defendants with President Trump on is going to really come back and bite him.
Yeah, I'll say this as an old school Ron Paul Republican. Ron Paul's candidacy exploded. His movement, he got in the first walkaways, actually. You could see the Ron Paulers. Democrats came across in droves. In fact, some of them became founding members of Oath Keepers to help me launch Oath Keepers. There were former Democrats who knew Hillary Clinton was a warmonger, also did not trust Barack Obama, but they trusted Ron Paul. They didn't like John McCain either, for all the same reasons. But they liked Ron Paul because he was actually sincere. They knew he was legit anti-war, legit anti-prison industrial complex, anti-military industrial complex, anti-corruption. That's why they put their faith in him. That same group of people put their faith in President Trump for much the same reason. They believed he was sincere, was an outsider who was going to shake things up. Michael Moore, the radical leftist filmmaker, described President Trump as a Molotov cocktail of the working class against the establishment. And that's the one time I would agree with Michael Moore. I think he was right about that. The working class in this country, all Americans, are sick and tired of corruption in Washington, D.C., on Wall Street, in our banks, all over our country. They want it fixed. So he was the Molotov cocktail of the working class against the establishment. He needs to be that again and take it down and save our country. I'm sure he's being told that you can't do these things like declassification and exposure of all the corruption because it'll destroy faith in our institutions. Well, that's already happened. Most Americans have zero faith in any of these politicians, zero faith in the FBI, the CIA, etc. They know,
Regardless of who's at the top.
regardless, they know across generations it's been corrupt. They're just giving up on it. They don't think that anything can fix it. So we need President Trump to step up and fix it for the American people.
So I think that's about it, right?
That's it. And we're happy to help. The group we represent, they are always available to the president and his staff, but otherwise, for now, we're going to leave them anonymous until further notice.
Questions? Gentlemen, questions?
Nope. Okay.
You sure?
All right. So we're available on our X channels. I'm at Real Oath Keepers on X, and Ivan's at
Just my name, Ivan Raiklin.
Real Ivan Raiklin, right?
No, just
That's right.
Ivan Raiklin.
At Ivan Raiklin. Right?
Raiklin.
So if you want to contact us, that's fine. And we look forward.
So one last thing.
We pray that President Trump and his advisors, especially Tulsi Gabbard, and like Ivan said, Elon Musk also, and Dana White, because of his position, we pray that they listen to this and set aside the naysayers and the talking heads that tell them they can't do this. Because if they don't do this, this country's doomed. They have to do it.
And then the last thing I will say is that at 1 o'clock, Carolyn Levitt is going to be taking questions at the White House in the press briefing room. So any of the press that I know that know me, I would urge you to continue to ask questions of this White House. When are they going to invoke the Insurrection Act, and explain why they have not done so yet?
But not just about Minnesota, but also about the corruption here in Washington, D.C. All right. God bless America.
God bless. Thank you.
All right.
Attorney, and this is Stewart Rhodes, founder of Oath Keepers, who was commuted by President Trump 1 year ago today.
And can I ask you
Also an
your
attorney.
message is to President Trump?
Yeah, the same thing you just talked about. I urged him to do this in 2020 and open letters to President Trump is to take down the deep state through mass declassification and also invocation of the Insurrection Act. So I think right now what we're seeing in Minnesota is just tip of the iceberg. The corruption in Minnesota was exposed by, what's the name of the journalist that exposed that?
Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger?
No, the young man that exposed
What are you talking about?
No, I'm talking about Minnesota.
Oh, Nick, what's his name?
Nick Shirley.
Nick Shirley.
So Nick Shirley, young, 23-year-old, exposed the corruption. That should have been exposed by the FBI. So that's a major frustration for me is what is going on in the FBI, the DOJ. So how come it took a young man like that to go and expose for him on his own the corruption in Minnesota, and only after that do they jump in? It's very frustrating, but great. Now they're doing it. Now you got Tim Walz going to step down. But the fraud in Minnesota by the Somalis and all that is nothing compared to what's going on in the
Within
capital.
our own
The
government.
fraud right here in Washington, D.C. They come in here, $174,000 a year salary, and they all walk out millionaires within a couple of years. Obviously, it's from insider trading and corruption. So we want that fixed.
What do you think about Trump's presidency 1 year in?
I think it started out great. I think Doge was fantastic. It was a great start. I mean, hey, one of the first things he did when he came into office was set me free from prison. I was one of the J6 political prisoners. So that was a wonderful day. And we're happy to see the beginning. The first 3 or 4 months were fantastic because Doge was on the right track. I want to see it all doged, all exposed, all the doors thrown open and all the skeletons thrown out into the streets of all the corruption and just drained of all the corruption in this town. But unfortunately, they got off track. Elon Musk, I think, was driven out by people that don't want that to happen. And I hope it comes back in.
Let me address that just real quick in phases. So from January 20th until May 31st, when Elon Musk was a special government employee, you saw massive exposure, just like when he purchased Twitter. So that was in the works. But then when all those criminal referrals and all that evidence started to go over to the Department of Justice, it went into like a black hole abyss.
Right.
In addition to that, from June 1st until September 10th, this White House still had the ear of the base, even though Elon Musk was on the outs. But it was on September 10th when Charlie Kirk was murdered before the entire world to hear and see that you started to see a complete policy shift from September 10th until January 20th right now, where the foreign interests just took over. And it stems from the major donors that have donated to him during that campaign cycle. And he's ignored the base.
Can I ask you, when were you pardoned?
That inauguration night. But I
Oh,
was
that
actually,
same
I was
night.
not pardoned, I was commuted.
Mhm.
So there are 14 of us that were set free, but we're all either oath
Keep it on.
convoys that we're still convicted felons, which is absurd.
And since that, what kind of contact have you had with the president or the White House?
None. I never had contact, which is ironic. You were accused of being, co-conspirators. In fact, to this day, there's still two criminal cases, true civil cases against President Trump, Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, myself, Enrique Tarrio, and our co-defendants all named, two lawsuits that are still active in Washington, D.C., alleging a conspiracy. Although we never ever talked to the president, had zero communication.
And what are your plans now? What do you do now?
Well, I'm rebuilding my organization, Oath Keepers, right now. But right now, I'm trying to obey my oath.
And what kind of relationship would you say that the Oath Keepers has to President Trump?
Like I said, we have zero contact with them. So we were here in Washington, D.C. to do security on January the 6th, as we had done 9 prior times at rallies in Washington, D.C., and then hundreds of times across the country. That's why we were here. But yes, the election was stolen and illegal and unconstitutional, violated Article 2 of the Constitution. I said that at trial. I looked the jury right in the eye and told them that. I looked the judge right in the eye in my sentencing. I refused to bend the knee. Refused to give in. It was a stolen election and a coup. So I called it out. Anyway, the point is, though, is that we need to have our country fixed. That's why we're talking about this.
Last minute, so we both over here. We for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm Stewart Rhodes, the founder of Oath Keepers. I'm a veteran and also a Yale Law School graduate.
This was live streamed.
Yeah, sure.
Question as well.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
When I have it here.
One second.
If you look online, there's when the left talks about ICE,
Sure.
they say that it's people from Oath Keepers and those movements are they've kind of volunteered into that.
Yeah, a lot of veterans are joining ICE. Yes.
Has that happened?
Well, a lot of veterans have joined us. That's absolutely true. Look, I think that the mass immigration into this country, just like the mass immigration into Europe, is part of a very well-planned program to destroy Western civilization, to bring people in such large numbers they can't possibly assimilate, and also being conditioned not to assimilate. My mother's side of the family came from Mexico. I'm part Mexican, and they came here and assimilated. But the ethos now is for immigrants to be conditioned not to assimilate. That's a problem. And so I think that's a part of a methodical, like I said, orchestrated destruction of Western
My parents fled
civilization.
the Soviet Union from communism.
Okay.
Come here, so
Yeah.
got a Mexican and
And a Russian.
Yeah.
And he speaks Russian.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, of course he does. Yeah.
and Spanish.
Okay, well,
Where
thank
you
you.
from?
You
I'm
bet.
from Sweden. Sweden.
Okay.
You
Well, hey,
journalist?
Yeah, I'm with her.
look what's happening to Sweden right now.
Well, what of all different things do you have in mind? The green
Bombings.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So,
The inside politics of Sweden.
pardon?
You mean the shootings and that
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
Say this,
The violence, right.
Yeah.
compliment to Sweden. You didn't have the draconian lockdowns and measures
Nope, we
during
did.
COVID.
That's right. You guys
You
did
were
the
the
right thing.
example.
Yeah.
The
The
rest
US screwed the pooch on that. You guys did a good job.
Yeah, I've heard people say that.
Yeah, it's true.
Sweden.
Yeah.
It's easier.
You have
Okay,
a question?
Thank you so much.
He was hanging out. No problem, man.
All right, appreciate you
I'm
coming
gonna
out.
throw
Yeah.
my banana away somewhere.
Sure. Yeah, good luck. I couldn't find a freaking trash can. Oh, you know what? I got a empty coffee cup there. Just stick it in that. That's my trash can.
Thank you.
Just some medical records also.
Ah, okay. How was that? What do you think?
Okay, end this.